global average surface temperature in 2020, tied with 2016 as the warmest year on record, according to analysis done by NASA. Climate action, or Goal 13, is one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. The objective of SDG 13 is to take urgent action to combat climate change and its related impacts. Welcome to another Window on the Week, where RI shares industry professionals and thought leaders' perspective on ESG issues. We are privileged today to have Tanya dos Santos, the Global Head of Sustainability at Investec. Her role has evolved over 19 years at Investec. In 2011, she assumed the sustainability role, which involves consolidating and reporting the non-financial position of the group.
It is wonderful to have you with us today. Investec being a global organization listed in South Africa, with our ESG ratings indicating a strong focus on sustainability and ESG. Tanya, how has Investec positioned itself in terms of integrating ESG into its strategy, especially climate change?
Hi, Anashwin. So essentially, Investec's sustainability strategy is based on a number of pillars. So to start with, we look at what we call living sustainably, and that's really about getting your house in order. So ensuring that operationally we have our policies and processes in place, and that we're taking care of our own carbon footprint. So that's the first pillar. The second, which is quite important, is stakeholder engagement. Very important right now to do quite extensive stakeholder engagement to understand what are those key material issues that our stakeholders are looking at from an ESG perspective. And the third pillar, which is probably the most important, but you can't do the third pillar until you do the first two, and that's the business focus. And the way we approach it is each business, we have very autonomous businesses, and each business will apply a sustainability lens to their area of expertise and work out what is best for them to do in this space. And they will partner with their clients on this sustainability journey. So that's how we incorporate sustainability across all areas of strategy.
Thank you for that. It seems that you have definitely integrated these processes into your business and the activities that you carry out on a daily basis. And you talked about a strong focus on stakeholders, and obviously stakeholder capitalism being one of them, a key buzzword in the world of ESG. Are you finding that companies are investing in taking Goal 13 climate action and reducing their respective carbon footprints seriously?
Well, first of all, to say that we still have lots of work to do to integrate sustainability fully into business strategy. It's not a simple exercise. There's a huge amount of awareness raising that needs to be done and education that needs to be done. So we certainly still have a long way to go. We're not there yet. In terms of Goal 13, it's quite different, and that's obviously on climate action. The goal was developed for countries, so it's quite hard for a corporate to track directly to Goal 13. So we would rather see how are we impacting on other SDGs, which will ultimately contribute to climate action. For us, it's one of our core focus areas. There are two, climate action and inequality are our two core focuses, but we will do that through other SDGs. So you asked specifically about carbon footprint and are our clients taking it seriously? If you look at, if we consider just our South African carbon emissions, more than 80% of that comes just from scope 2. So just scope 2 is Eskom emissions. So we have very little that we can do around managing that. It's very hard to find renewable sources to replace that. But there are a number of innovative ways. So we would partner with our clients to try and help them in a number of ways. But for us personally, we've looked at things like ZA-RECs, which are renewable energy certificates, and watching how the space changes. For example, wheeling arrangements are coming into play now. where we won't directly be able to put solar panels on our head office. We wouldn't be able to procure enough energy, but we can do it in other areas and then wheel it back into the grid. So there are a number of options you're looking at, but Scope 2 is the core focus of carbon emissions in South Africa, and we really need to shift away from our coal-dependent energy program to get this right.
So Investec is definitely involved in actually assisting these companies in decarbonizing their supply chains. Can you just explain a little bit more in terms of how you actually physically do that?
Actually, I think it's the opposite. They're really seeing the business opportunity of being less dependent because of power outages. So, the business survival is dependent on not being so dependent on Eskom and on the grid, and becoming more self-sufficient, and the cost benefits that come with it. So for, in the instance of solar, the prices have come down dramatically in the last 10 years. So you now have viable options that make sense for business. So the way we would do this is, once again, it's through our different business offerings. We have an international expertise in our power and infrastructure space. So this is where we're now funding the renewable, the big renewable energy programs. We, at the moment, are launching a private energy fund called Ravino. So this takes it into a private equity space. On our private banking side, we've offered a solar platform to clients where they can link a solar option to their mortgage. And then, just some of the smaller corporates, for example, if we could be funding a retailer in terms of putting solar on their various projects, or in our property business, we fund malls, and how are you helping them to reduce their emissions through water solutions and energy solutions. So it really is a business focus, and across the businesses, how are you advising and working with your clients to do what makes sense for them?
Okay, thanks for that, Tanya. That sounds very interesting. So how do you encompass that, or how do you put that together with actually disclosing your projects and what you're actually investing in to all your stakeholders?
Well, so I did forget. I mean, there's some really great products coming through now around green bonds, ESG-linked bonds, green loans, and this you can do down into the private client space and right up into big corporate space. So really starting to see a big interest on that side, and through that you're now incentivizing your clients to do the right thing and to decarbonize their activities. So you were asking about how we incorporate that into our reporting.
Yes.
So we would monitor, measure, and track our progress in terms of what are we doing in this space. Across the whole ESG lens, we follow the GRI framework in terms of reporting. We're also, from a carbon-specific perspective, we have signed up to the TCFDs, the Task Force for Climate-Related Disclosures, and that's really where the heart of carbon reporting lies. We have to follow a format. There's 4 pillars: strategy, risk management, measurement, and target setting. The strategy part is core to that. If you don't understand what you're trying to achieve, you can't monitor and measure how you're going to get there. We're also members of the CDP, the Carbon Disclosure Project, which also helps us guide how we report on these things.
Yes, we do see that from our research into Investec. But we also see that many listed corporates actually don't submit to CDP. Why do you think this is? Is it very onerous? Is it difficult to report on because you need systems? Why do you think this is?
I think there are a number of reasons, and it's not just a few. It's really poor how many. I think it's only 63 South African companies that report in terms of CDP, and that's not even the water CDP, that's just your general carbon CDP. So yes, there definitely, a lot of work needs to be done to encourage South African corporates. And interestingly, there are a lot of business opportunities to be able to help companies to be able to report in terms of CDP. The reason is there are a lot of challenges. It is onerous. For us, Scope 1 and Scope 2, which is, the CDP is about reporting your full extent of carbon impact. Scope 1 and 2 is relatively simple. Scope 3, we do, we do more than a lot of companies. We'll record our business travel and our waste, etc. But where we really struggle from a financial sector perspective is your carbon impact from your loans and investments. And the reason for this is because there isn't an agreed international methodology of how to do this. And it's new. So we need more guidance from the regulators, particularly in South Africa, on how we should be doing this. They should be supplying us with these climate scenarios so that we can all start reporting accordingly. And that's where you'll really see what the true emissions are in the financial sector. A large reason why we've been looking at it is our UK business is already having to report on this. So we joined up to the Partnership for Carbon Accounting Financials last year, where they're trying to ensure that banks follow a similar methodology, because if we all start making our own assumptions and following our own climate scenarios, then you won't have comparable data at the end of the day. And that's not useful for anyone. So we really do need to come together as a sector and agree how are we going to classify things, what are the definitions, what are the methodologies, so that it is comparable for investors who'll be looking at this information.
Yes, I'm sure there's many stakeholders out there who believe in what you're saying. So is that why Investec was one of the first banks to introduce a fossil fuel policy? So what exactly is that, and do you think the other banks are likely to follow?
I think the other banks have already been following. Their policies are largely limited just to coal, and even within that, it's coal. You get coal extraction or coal-fired power generation. So they have done the bare minimum, and I think we were fortunate that our business is much simpler. We're not a retail bank. We're much smaller. We don't have as many deals to assess. So we did that analysis to say, well, what is our baseline? Where do we stand with this? And we also have more international pressure from stakeholders. So when I spoke about stakeholder engagement, when we started looking at extending, we had an internal fossil fuel policy. When we wanted to extend it so that we could publish it and ensure that it was comprehensive, we engaged with not just shareholders, not just with clients. We engaged with the stakeholder activists. We engaged with Just Share. We engaged with similar companies overseas to really get a deeper understanding of what are the issues and what are they really looking for. And off the back of that feedback, we were then able to say, fine, we're not going to stop at coal. We're going to look at the full spectrum of fossil fuels. We're going to do coal, oil, and gas. And once again, we're not going to just limit it to extraction and power generation. We're also looking at infrastructure and distribution. So it is a very comprehensive policy. It does have its downfalls, which we acknowledge. We would like to be able to be more specific in terms of guidelines and criteria of who we would and wouldn't deal with. But we also need to be mindful that while this is not a journey, because if we carry on a journey, a journey can carry on at a tortoise's pace or a snail's pace. We can't afford that. But it is transition, and we need to work with our clients. So we're not saying we will not work with certain clients who have more than X% at this stage in fossil fuels. We're saying, hang on, how committed are you to the transition? What measures have you put in place? How are you adapting your business model to show that you are on this journey and transition with us? And that's our focus. But in a year or two's time, I imagine we will need to start putting some more hardcore boundaries in place.
So it sounds like it's more than just a policy on paper. It's something that you are actually actively involved in, and it's an evolving process.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much, Tanya, for your thought-provoking insights. We definitely hope to see you again on our Window on the Week.
I am Aneshan Pillay, Acting CEO of Risk Insights. And thank you for joining us for another episode of Window on the Week. We look forward to seeing you next week. Stay safe.